I'm Charlene Harrington, and I want to welcome all of you here today. And I'm going to introduce Mike Oxford. We're very pleased to have Mike here. He's the Executive Director of the Topeka Independent Living Resource Center, and he's been active in disability rights for over 20 years, and he's well known to many of you. But we're going to have him kick off things by talking a little bit about reflections on personal assistance services from a disability rights perspective. And the bios of everybody are in the packet, so we're not doing long introductions. But Mike, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. And so, for those of you that know me, you know 15 minutes of me talking is either going to be really scary or not enough. And, you know, you're going to get my reflections, so hopefully you will disagree, because I think that we are kind of at a watershed around this issue, and so we really need to talk. The importance of personal assistance, I mean, real briefly, I've been involved in this because I started working in independent living in 1984, it's more than 20 years, part-time. I was in graduate school. And what I was doing actually was assisting people with leaving state hospitals, moving into their own apartments, living independently, and so on. And I thought that's what independent living was. You know, I thought that's what everyone in independent living did, and what all these programs, and it was just kind of normal programs and services and so on. And of course found out that I was really wrong, that this was a pretty new thing, especially in my state. And, you know, the other thing that really bothered me was how people were treated. And it was that real eye-opener that a lot of us have had about how come people were locked up and put away and treated that way, and there was this whole sub-society hidden away, and people were basically locked up and treated horribly for no other reason but their disabilities. So I guess now we would say I was providing support services and so on, but at the time, you know, there wasn't even, we just barely had a waiver going in our state and so on. So I've been interested since then in a lot of ways, and I still think that's really what independent living is all about. And if you can't be in a community, if you can't really live a life, then the ADA and IEPs, what do they matter if you're going to be locked up and put away? So this is just a real important thing, I think, to all of us. The personal assistance in the independent living movement, it's really about liberty. It's about individual freedom and so on, and that's the whole purpose and the whole driver and everything else. And so kind of from this perspective, it's interesting to look at where we are now with, we've got an industry, and we've got all these kinds of programs and professionals and all this stuff going on. But in the beginning, it was really about people with disabilities, you know, getting a little assistance and being able to run our own lives. And, you know, Judy Heumann, independent living is control over decision making, not doing things yourself. And so for the independent living movement, that's really where personal assistance began. And, you know, I just kind of want to say from this perspective, for a lot of us that get real excited over this, and I think one of the issues is, in this way, I think that the disability rights movement invented personal assistance. It's ours. You know, we came up with it, and we want to keep a hold of it. And there is an issue over that very thing, over that control, about to make sure it's not going to become a business, and it's not going to have this external control. And so we end up where we are now of, well, in my state, people are allowed to self-direct. If you're allowed to do anything, someone can take that away from you. Because if I allow you, I can disallow you. And that's just a real important thing where we are now. And I think that's where, you know, one of the cruxes is, and we want to be really careful. And we were talking about that yesterday, actually, with the new Medicaid director, about this very issue of being allowed and those control issues that we really have to watch. So we think personal assistance is ours. We invented it, we own it, and we want to have a lot of say-so over it and not just give it up to an industry into professions and so on and be allowed. Because we have rights, we're born with them, you know, they're inalienable in this country, and that is the beginning of personal assistance with the independent living movement. So really, we skip ahead, and then in the early 80s, of course, 1981, waivers. Waivers happened to save money. There was all this research about where we are now. Back then, it was known we were going to come to this point. There was going to be a baby boom, you know, big peak, and there's going to be a lot of people that were going to need assistance. And how can we control costs if we keep using the model back then of the nursing facilities and institutions? It was going to be out of control with costs. And here we are now. But that's what waivers were. You can read a really good report from 1983 from the National Governors Association, and all the states got together and they did this report about how controlling costs. And that's okay as long as we understand, you know, that it's about liberty and independence. And it's okay if costs are controlled there, but that's really the, you know, what we want. Over time, and the beginning waivers were kind of small. They didn't work that well. They didn't work that well in my state. It was Monday through Friday services. It was kind of like 8 to maybe 6 in the evening services, and that was it. So you couldn't get assistance on the weekends. You couldn't get it early enough to go to work, and so on and so forth. And so at home in Kansas, and around the same time in the country that's still going on, this notion of self-direction started coming up. Why can't we get our own attendants? Why can't we schedule them? Why can't we tell them what to do? Because then we could have someone come in early enough to go to work or do whatever, late enough to stay out late, work late, have fun, do whatever. And so we started working on that at home, and it was a big deal around the country and still is. And we basically got that done. A right in state law to hire, fire, train, manage, pay attendants. And in our state, and we thought it was important to do it as a right in law. And this right, you know, continues to come under attack as this self-direction notion has kind of expanded to quote other groups, because some people shouldn't have that right. You know, they need supervision and assistance and control, and to be allowed to exercise that right if you happen to have a certain IQ score, or you hit your head real hard and have a TBI, or you have a 65th birthday. You know, I never have understood this whole thing that one day you're 64, you're self-directed, consumer-controlled, and then the 364th day happens and you're still self-directed and consumer-controlled, and and you're doing your own thing, and then you go to bed that night after your birthday party, and you wake up and it's like, whoa, now you need targeted case management. And now you're only eligible for 8 hours a day. And now you need nursing supervision. And know that, you know, the home modification you needed is not allowed, and so on and so forth. And this whole thing that we really have to watch is, why is that? What happens in that minute in time when you were 64 and then you turned 65 that made all this big difference? Nothing really. No one can ever really explain it, but there's an industry out there. And what the industry says is, well, yeah, but there are people that are 102, and they've got dementia, and they've got this, and they've got that, you know, and so that doesn't explain what happened in this minute in time, that there's this other reason out there. And so, you know, the other thing that's happened with the industry is these silos, and the same thing with IQ scores. How come you don't get any help, you know, if your IQ score is a 94, but if it's a 91, you can get some assistance, and furthermore, you have all these controls imposed on you, and you have to be watched and everything else. And so again, what happened to liberty and independence here? You know, why are we doing things? Who's winning here? It's not necessarily the people. You know, so there's this industry, and there are these drivers, and we just have to watch that, because the point of all this is freedom.